Thank you for taking time out today to view this presentation from TANC, the Trans-American Alliance for a National Consensus, advocating a dual platform, direct democracy, and citizens' assembly grassroots legislative movement in America. Well, this graphic that I did for our representative democracy at work, I imagine, tells most of the story of what you see here of federal and state level politicians and various influence peddlers that you'll see in these pictures that have been convicted of various crimes. A particular note, if you see on the bottom row there is the pardoned and convicted members of the Nixon administration, and really kind of what we see is sort of the historical benchmark of when the corruption of the federal government began, and the growing influence of corporate contributors and special interests in our government. And for what you see here, clearly, we believe American citizens deserve better and can do better by individually and collectively addressing socioeconomic problems of their fellow citizens in all reaches of the country. One of the things that TANC is initially proposing is that college students and scholars serve as the key catalysts for this citizens' assembly, which would bring together all the leading segments of society and citizens from all leading segments in order to craft truly nonpartisan consensus legislation through the auspices of, potentially through the auspices of universities or other public meeting places in all 50 states of the Union. Again, one of our key emphases here is that we believe a citizens' assembly would offer a decentralized, local, and regionalized consensus legislative assembly that could reach in all reaches of all states of the Union. And really we see it as a chance for American citizens to be the ethical conscience of a democracy. The foundational blueprint for the Citizens Assembly comes from our National Alliance Renewal Act, or NARA, and it's a draft bill that proposes an amendment to the Constitution for a binding but complementary permanent electorate branch of the federal government, and they began looking to bring in a rotating pool of citizens to craft nonpartisan legislation. I think this operational flow chart kind of really tells a story here of how the bill-making process will work within a citizens' assembly. For the first year and each subsequent year, there'll be a national alliance conference. It can be done in person and also through possibly a webcast feed. And what it would do, it would look to identify key socioeconomic problems and set a bill-making agenda for a bunch of specialized committees that would meet on local committee hearings and town hall meetings on the local and regional levels. They would solicit expert testimony, of course, from all key segments of society, compile the findings, then take it to a select representative group of these committees, select delegates and consuls for final bill, I should say for draft bill authoring. Then they would go in for an internal review. Then that bill would be put up to all the local regional committees, and then up for, if they approve it or make any revisions, up for a citizens' assembly vote. If that bill gains passage internally, then that would be submitted to Congress and the President, which would be able again to review the bill and vote it for potential passage. Now, in the event that the Congress or either houses of Congress or the President veto or reject a citizens' assembly authored bill, I should note, then the Electorate Branch, the Citizens' Assembly, would be able to vote internally to do a 2/3 vote to call for a national electorate referendum for the bill to be put up in front of all American voters. And if 51% of the electorate, or a majority of 51% or more, voted to override congressional veto or congressional no votes, then the bill will be enacted into law. Similarly, it could be just as easily rejected as well. Again, these are some of the committees that we think would make sense in terms of reviewing specific legislation in need of reform. Now I can think of three right off the top that would probably be very important. Would be healthcare and insurance reform, the solvency of Social Security, and also the Wall Street reform bills, which I think many Americans would agree that Congress fell woefully short and in terms of legislation and tilted it towards corporate interests. Again, the structural meaning of an electorate branch would be that it would effectively, most of its interaction would be with the executive and legislative branches of the federal government. And on a limited basis, it would interact with the judicial branch, and that would be largely to decisions that it makes and based on, in terms of the constitutional law and how it affects the implementation of a bill. And the most recent example I could cite of that is the recent decision by the Supreme Court to grant personhood to corporations for unlimited contributions to individual candidates, political causes, and parties, which I think an electorate branch or citizens assembly would want to review that and possibly amend that greatly in terms of legislation reform. Now, in terms of, there's been a precedent set before for citizens assembly, and it was done by our friends up in British Columbia, Canada. They got there with 120 citizens, 120 residents of British Columbia, as you see in this round table on the far left, that were able to craft a referendum, and it was the single transferable voter, STV, which they put in front of voters in 2004 and 2009. Basically, what we see is this citizens, citizens assembly branch really sets an outstanding template and model for what the United States could accomplish on a federal level. And then when you look at the United States itself, there are 24 states that practice both initiatives and referendums, as you see in the blue coded states here, and then another handful here that have initiative and referendums separately. But if we can get 2/3 of the states to have their own initiatives and referendums in their own states, why can't we then go to these legislatures and with the citizens to petition to get the states to ratify national initiatives and referendums and a citizens assembly on a federal level? And then if you look on a global basis, the benefits of direct democracy are really kind of proven and correlated through the United Nations Human Development Index report. And if you look at these key developed nations and the far right-hand column, all of them have had some form of direct democracy, national initiatives and referendums in their history. Switzerland being one of the obviously the stellar role model in all this, of 450 referendums and initiatives since 1848. And then you look at the United States, where we've slipped to 12th, and again, this is measured on such things as standard of living, industrial competitiveness, education, life expectancy, and all these things. And you can see the United States is showing signs of slippage, and really begs the question: when will the United States join the other developed nations in practicing some form of direct democracy and possibly citizens' assembly to correct these problems? And won't go too deep into this slide, but if we went with a proposed collegiate structure, we're talking about 3% of all universities, of 130, maybe 150 schools maximum, and anywhere from 2 to 6 universities per state, depending on the population and the number of large urban centers within the state. And again, what we're talking here too is probably about 0.003% of students also scholars participating, about 51,000 students as consuls, as delegates, and 5,100 scholars as potentially as delegates, about a 10-to-1 ratio. And if not, if we couldn't get the participation of universities, I would say then to take this to retired civil servants and other leading members of society, including Economic Development Commission members. And what we're talking about here is really a self-sustaining alliance. We think that what we proposed in NAR, you'll see specific budget proposals, but it's basically shifting or reallocating existing federal funding, such as Pell student grants and federal student loans, that would be increased slightly for the students and scholars that participate in this. And if you look on the federal and private sector levels, foundation research for research and development, I should say, funding, it tops over $300 billion in 2004. What we're talking about here then is about 1/3 of 1% would be the operational costs of doing a citizens assembly on an annual basis. And I guess this slide really kind of says it all. We're really looking to break the 40-year pattern of partisanship and divisiveness and corruption within our federal government in both parties. And it's really, the core of it is to mitigate and contradict the influence of 36,000 lobbyists. Groups like corporate contributors and special interest groups that are funneling money through the corridors of Washington and influencing and tilting legislation in their favor. And they've spent $20 billion, over $20 billion, from 1998 to 2007 to swing and tilt legislation in their favor. And again, what we're talking about is a self-renewing direct democracy, one that allows citizens to feel a sense of empowerment through a citizens' assembly, but also through voting directly in national electorate referendums and even ballot initiatives. And what we're talking about too is something that, if we're able to mitigate or contradict the influence of lobbyists, because it's spread out on a decentralized democracy on a regional, local basis across all 50 states, will potentially free up our elected representatives from not having to get into the political divisiveness and ideological battles, because they're beholden to the money, the big dollar contributions from corporate contributors and lobbyists. I think you can get here the essence of the benefits of consensus electorate legislation are many, and we think it's important to restore that competitiveness, the prosperity, open competition of markets, and we think all this can come because of these various benefits that would come from citizens' assembly. Lastly, we really need your help. If you can come to our website, www.transamericanalliance.org, you can view the NARA draft bill and offer also suggestions on how you think that it needs some either further amendments. And what we're really talking about here is that the Constitution, living up to the credo of a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And we really believe that Americans, so you can be the ethical consciousness of democracy. I thank you for your time.